support for Israel loomed large over Vice President Harris's campaign. Trump saw an opportunity, winning the endorsement of a number of Muslim and Arab American leaders in the key swing state of Michigan just days before the election. To understand why so many Arab and Muslim Americans chose to vote for Donald Trump, I sat down with Dr. Bashar Bahbah. He's a Palestinian-American who voted for Joe Biden in 2020. He then launched the group Arab Americans for Trump and campaigned on his behalf in the state of Michigan. Why don't you start by telling me about your group Arab Americans for Trump?
The reason why I founded the organization is because since October of last year, we've been telling President Biden and his Vice President Harris and their administration to please stop enabling Israel by providing them with an unlimited amounts of material military aid as well as political and diplomatic cover. We are not per se against Israel, but we don't want to enable Israel to commit a genocide in Gaza. And after repeated pleadings with the Biden administration, and no one was there to listen to us, I decided to change parties, and I began and founded the Arab Americans for Trump. And the goal was to help President Trump to get re-elected to the presidency. And you know what? It worked. We worked very hard, and we turned around many skeptical Arabs and Muslims in the United States who at times called me crazy, out of my mind, you know, or even a walking garbage can. But nevertheless, you know, I persisted, and I believed in the message that President Trump was talking about, which was peace.
What makes you think that Trump would be any different?
Trump has reached out to the Arab Muslim American communities more than any other presidential candidate that I can recall. He is the first presidential nominee put in Dearborn, Michigan, which is the Arab America capital of the United States. And so he has told repeatedly to many of the leaders that he had met with, his goal is to establish peace in the Middle East, to end wars, to end the suffering of civilians, and to lay the groundwork for a permanent peace in the Middle East based on a two-state solution. And Trump, as we have known, in his promises to the Israelis and American Jews, is a man of his word. I mean, when he said he was going to move the embassy, nobody believed him. He did. Not, you know, it was, of course, to the displeasure of Palestinians and their supporters around the world. But there was an interesting aspect to that, because even when Trump recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, he never precluded the idea of potentially recognizing East Jerusalem as the capital of Palestine. Also, Trump of 2016, Trump of 2020, and Trump of 2024 is a different individual, in my view.
What makes you think that he's actually going to follow through with these promises? Is there anything that makes you believe that he's actually going to follow through? Because he's often been criticized for saying certain things and them not necessarily, you know, happening.
I spoke with him personally on 2 occasions. And Arab American, Muslim American leaders spoke with him even before they endorsed him. And they asked him about peace in the Middle East. They asked him about their homelands and how they want tranquility. They talked to him about their agenda in the United States, which is quite similar to the Republican agenda in terms of religious-based education for our children and the social aspect of our relationship to family. So there are a lot of commonalities, and you know, for somebody who really angered a lot of Arab Americans, Muslim Americans between 2017 and 2020, he really managed to come around and win that community.
You seem to be saying that actually when it comes to values even beyond the conflict in the Middle East, Mr. Trump and the Republican Party have a lot more in common with the Arab American community than perhaps other parties. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct. I mean, in Michigan, for example, in Dearborn, the community took the school board to court because they had books that were sexually explicit in the libraries, and the families in Dearborn did not want those books. They wanted to teach their values to their own kids. They did not want the school to teach those values to their kids.
You know, Arab Americans have been reliably a democratic group. Do you think their vote for Trump is more anger at the Biden administration? Did they punish the vice president, or is it out of conviction for what Trump stands for? In other words, was it a protest vote, or was it a vote out of actual conviction for what Trump stands for?
It was a vote emanating from two things: fear and hope. Fear that if Harris wins, that we would get another 4 years of a Biden administration. Because when asked a few weeks ago, Harris said, when she was asked, what would you have done differently if you had been president in President Biden's shoes? She thought and said, I would not have done anything differently. For us, the fear of having 4 years of a Biden/Harris policies was unthinkable. So that was the fear element. The hope is that Trump came and said, I understand your concerns, I understand your needs, vote for me, and I will listen. You will have a place at the table and a voice to be heard. Of course, the social values, the faith-based values is one element that's common. But the most important factor for Arab American votes, according to recent polls, at an 81% number, was the issue of Gaza. And then Israel started attacking Lebanon. Dearborn is full of Lebanese Shia who live in those areas of southern Lebanon where Israel has been hammering for the past month or so. So those people were angry, no question about it, but then at the same time, they believed that the only way that they could make a change is through voting for another individual other than Harris, and that was Trump.
So in many ways, it was because they just didn't believe that Harris was the change candidate.
Absolutely. I mean, Arab America, the United States as a whole, looking at how Trump swept the United States on the eve of the elections, wanted change. People wanted change. People right now on the economic side, the person in the street, right now what they pay for a dozen eggs is 2 or 3 times what they used to pay when President Trump was president. They had good, steady jobs, and people are longing for those times. Setting political issues aside, these were important day-to-day life issues for many Americans, including Arab and Muslim Americans.
So I guess that's something that Arab Americans have perhaps in common with the larger American community, is that they simply were not convinced that Kamala Harris was the candidate for change.
Yes, absolutely.
Can you tell me a little bit about Donald Trump's outreach efforts to the Arab American community? What was it like to sort of campaign on his behalf in these communities? What messaging or what approaches do you think really succeeded in attracting Arab Americans to the Trump ticket?
The turning point or the beginning of the effort to garner support for President Trump was in May of this year, when a meeting was held in Troy, Michigan, and hosted by a Syrian-American physician in which during that meeting, I attended as chairman of Arab Americans for Trump. Dr. Masad Boulos, Tiffany Trump's father-in-law, attended. Michael Boulos attended, and Richard Grenell attended. And Richard Grenell was the acting former head of national intelligence under Trump. So the heavy guns were brought to bear. They even brought Bilal Muhammad, the heavyweight champion, boxing champion, with them as a sign of, affection, or as a sign of goodwill. And from there, we started with people being fairly skeptical. And then the continuation of the war in Gaza, and then the war on Lebanon. We want change, and that change could only come from President Trump. Now, has it been an easy path? Absolutely not. It's been torturous. That respect and outreach made a huge difference because President Trump made himself available, thanks to Dr. Masad Boulos and Richard Grenell. He made himself available to the community many, many times. I mean, at least 10, 15 meetings were held between the president and the community leaders. So that kind of respect, they did not see a shred of that from the Harris campaign. Harris refused to allow a Palestinian-American to be on the stage of the DNC when she allowed a Jewish American family, rightly so, to speak at the DNC, who had hostages in Gaza, but the Palestinian Americans had family members killed in Gaza. And so that was a major slight. Absolutely. I'm talking about Democrats, that turned off Democrats against Harris. They went three different ways. One, there's the uncommitted camp that essentially said, we're not voting for Trump, we're not voting for Harris, we're not voting for anyone. So then there was the camp that supported Jill Stein, the third-party candidate, who said everything that was pro-Palestinian and was pleasing to the Arabs and Muslim Americans. However, there was also a contingency, which was the majority, that ended up supporting Trump because they believe that he is an element of change. He showed respect to the community, and that he would do what he promised to do in terms of delivering peace and stopping the wars throughout the Middle East.
I want to go back to something that you mentioned, which is that actually in the last election, you voted for Joe Biden and decided not only to vote for Donald Trump in this election, but to actually campaign on his behalf in your communities. Can you tell me a little bit more about that change of heart? I'm sure it wasn't an overnight decision. Was there a process? Can you walk me through how you changed your mind, how Trump managed to flip you personally?
I know what Trump did that really upset and angered Palestinians and Arabs and Muslims during his first term. There was talk about a Muslim ban. There was the move of the embassy. There was the recognition of the Golan Heights. He cut off aid to UNRWA. He closed down the PLO mission in Washington, and he closed the U.S. consulate in East Jerusalem, which is considered as the U.S. embassy to the Palestinians. I'm aware of all of that. But, meeting with President Trump and his inner circle, they have said that there would be no such thing as a Muslim ban. All it is extensive vetting of people coming from troubled country. Now, as far as the Golan Heights, we know the United States is the only country that has recognized Israel's sovereignty over the Golan Heights. And so in many ways, we see that there is a level of maturity, if I may call it that has led us to believe that things would change under Trump. Now, if we look under the Biden administration, he did not move the embassy back to Tel Aviv. He did not reopen the U.S. consulate in East Jerusalem. He did not reopen the PLO mission in Washington, D.C. And he stopped funding UNRWA again. So Biden has not done us any favors. And Biden has been proven to be a weak leader. Every time Biden put a red mark or a red line, Netanyahu crossed it and there were zero consequences. Netanyahu kept doing the same and there were zero consequences. And as a result, even the image of the United States as a weak country, has started spreading. And that's not an image that we want to portray to the world. And so when it comes to President Trump, in my opinion, Trump is the only individual in the world that Netanyahu fears. And as such, if Trump tells him to stop the wars, I am sure there would be consequences. What they are, I do not know.
I understand that you have Palestinian roots. You're Palestinian-American yourself. You're
Yes.
from Jerusalem. There are so many things that Trump has done in his first term. You've mentioned the moving of the embassy. You've mentioned the recognition of Golan Heights as under Israeli sovereignty. But also under his administration, the United States stopped recognizing settlements in the occupied West Bank as illegal. I'm
Yes.
wondering, on a somewhat personal level, as a Palestinian American, how do you reconcile all of these actions with your support for the president-elect?
Now, at this point in time, having President Trump hearing us repeatedly and having seen our support that led him to win the presidency, we believe that President Trump will listen to our concerns.